Welcome to the Art of Adventure. This is 5 Minute Friday, and today I'm going to tell you the story of how superconductors got written. Superconductors is a book that I wrote, and it's coming out in July. And I thought I'd take a look back at the process, how the concept even got started, and then what the publishing process was like to give you a sense for what it might be like if you want to publish a book. So I'll just sort of walk you through a chronological timeline of how this got started. And I actually didn't expect to be writing a book anytime soon, except that one of the guests on this show, J.G. Francoeur, made a really good case that you should have a book, that it builds credibility so you can get better speaking opportunities and raise your coaching rates and basically just position yourself much better. A book acts like a business card, but it has a lot more weight to it. So that got me thinking about creating a book. And he said, you already have enough content. You've done so many interviews for the Art of Adventure that you probably have enough content to create a book. And at that time I thought, I'll just transcribe all the interviews and compile them into a book. So that was August 2016. In September 2016, I talked to Guy Vincent, who's the founder of Publishizer, and I had met him in Bali at a co-working space, and he suggested I put it on Publishizer and run a crowdfunding campaign to launch the book. It sounded like a good idea. They seemed interested in helping me along the process. They put one of their team on the project, on my project, Lee Constantine, and he was great. We had weekly calls throughout basically the month before my crowdfunding campaign launched and during the crowdfunding campaign. So originally the book was called Conductors, and after I signed the publishing contract, the name was changed later to Superconductors. So I went as far as having a cover designed for Conductors using 99 designs, and that was great. We had so Lee helped me write a legitimate book proposal. We had a professional cover. I made an introduction video for the crowdfunding campaign, and we had a pretty legitimate concept for the book. And the goal was to get 250 pre-orders for the book, which would signal to publishers that it was a legit book project. And eventually the goal was to get picked up by a publisher. And the reason that I wanted to go with the traditional publishing route was, if I'm doing a book for credibility, then I don't want to necessarily realize as many profits as I do want to build the status as an expert in the field. And so I actually picked the topic of the book, Conductors, as a blend of the ways that I wanted to position myself as a coach, as a digital nomad, as an adventurer, as a storyteller. And the final outcome for Superconductors ended up being that blend. And so the purpose that it's going to serve, or I hope that it's going to serve, will position me the way that I'm hoping it will be. So many of the interviews from the Art of Adventure were featured in Superconductors, which is great, but it was a lot less verbatim, a lot less sort of just taking parts of the transcript and putting them into the book, rather than sort of me paraphrasing a concept that they had brought up and then explaining it in detail, which was more work than I expected it to be. In general, these projects, any big project you take on, I have a rule of thumb that's going to be 10 times harder than you think it's going to be. And that held true in this sense as well. That's held true for things I've done in the past, like going to graduate school or trying to be a professional cyclist or starting a business, whatever. It sounds really easy because the people that tell it to you have gone through it and it's familiar to them, and it's, there's just a few steps and here's what you have to do. Well, publishing a book sounded like that, but in reality it was much more challenging. So let's go back to the campaign. We did hit 255 pre-orders for the book. And Some of those pre-orders were bought by corporations who were buying the book in bulk in exchange for me coming and doing a workshop around the book. Some of those pre-orders were bought by sponsors, people who were buying 10 or 20 books at a time. And the majority of the books were bought by individuals buying 1, 2, or 3 copies, people in my personal network that I invited to buy the book. It took a lot of phone calls, a lot of asking people if they wanted to support the crowdfunding campaign. Probably, I don't think anyone supported it just by stumbling across the campaign and deciding that they liked it. They all had some connection, either listeners of this podcast, people who I had met around the world, or people that I directly invited to support the campaign. So once the campaign was finished, the campaign itself raised about $7,200. And once the campaign was finished, Publishizer, in particular, Lee and Guy, I think, and maybe other members of their team, were talking with publishers around the world, traditional publishers, hybrid publishers, pitching my book proposal to them. And 18 of the 50 or so that they talked to expressed interest in publishing Superconductors. And I talked back and forth with several of them, probably 4 or 5 publishers, seriously, got on the phone with them and sort of listened to what they had to say. And I went with probably one of the longest standing traditional publishers. Their name is Kogan Page. They have offices in London and New York and Hong Kong, and they have a strong history of publishing business books in my genre. So I was really excited. Part of their proposal was that they would put some marketing effort into the book. Of course, I'll be marketing the book as well to people like the listeners of this podcast. But it was nice to know that they'd be putting some resources behind marketing, which is a little bit rare, as I understand it, in the publishing industry. So signed a contract with Kogan Page. I asked them for an advance. They weren't planning on giving me an advance. They gave me a small advance, $1,500, that is basically going to go to me buying my own book from them so that I can sell it or send it to the supporters of the crowdfunding campaign, because everyone's still has to get their books that they were promised. So then we signed the contract in February 2017. So this is 5 months after starting the project. Signed a contract, and I was paired with an editor on staff, and we agreed to a submission schedule. So which is basically 2 chapters a month for the next 5 months of basically the summer of 2017. And as I'm sure they knew, I fell behind schedule. I think a lot of authors probably fall behind schedule. And my approach, and again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't planning on writing a book. My approach was to draft all of the chapters and then slowly piece together the chapters as a framework. And I got halfway through the year and I had all of the chapters halfway done, but I hadn't submitted fully anything. And it started to get to the point where I needed to just focus on a single chapter, wrap it up. Each chapter is about 6,000 words because the book is 10 chapters, 60,000 words total. And so I would target that length and make sure I had hit all the major points. And then I had to get the chapter in because there was multiple back and forths of feedback that I got from the editor. In particular, she was asking me to be more specific or to clarify something or to cut out irrelevant bits or to provide proper references. This book has so many references. There's probably 400 or more source pieces of material, 200 podcast episodes, probably 100 books, 100 articles and journal pieces that went into the material for this book. So it's quite quite a lot of explicit references and probably quite a lot of references of concepts in there that didn't even end up getting specifically referenced. So a lot of source material. And so one of the great things about having a legitimate editor and a traditional publisher is that they can make the quality of the writing and how the book actually reads and making sure that everything's properly cited. They have a process for that, and they make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Basically, because they're going to be making money on the book, it needs to be up to a certain level of quality, which I really love. It helped me learn a lot about the writing process so that if I ever want to write another book on my own, which at this point, I probably have 2 or 3 book ideas in the works, probably will write another book. It's nice to know what a fully professional publishing project looks like. So in the beginning, in most of 2017, I was probably working about 20 hours a week writing the book. And then later, probably October, November, December, January, February, I was probably working more like 40 hours a week on the book, on top of running this podcast and my coaching business and my retreat business and all the other businesses that I was doing. So it was quite a hectic time of year, Christmas and New Year's time, getting the project wrapped up. Along the way, Kogan Page, the publisher, redesigned the cover, which still has a nice bright color burst on the front. It's a big, bold cover that looks great, a little bit different than the one I originally designed, but they designed it using fonts and color schemes that are in line with the rest of their catalog, because it has to look good when they're selling it to international booksellers out of their book catalog. Along the way, when I'm talking about those reference materials, sometimes I knew that I had a gap in my reference material. So I'd actually target specific guests and specific topics on the Art of Adventure that I knew were going to be good source material for the book. So I did double duty. I was able to publish those shows on the Art of Adventure. So these are shows with Travis Sheridan, Jeff Shapiro, John Levy, for example, that made it into the book. So after all that process, the book was submitted late, several months late. I think probably two full months past the original deadline. And of course, publishers know that first-time authors are going to be notoriously bad at turning their stuff in. So I'm just really glad that it got finished and was able to hit the publishing deadline that they set, because it'd be a major embarrassment for all of us if we had missed the publishing deadline. So the book was submitted, edited, proofed by multiple proofreaders and editors, and then sent back to me to proof one final time. And there's just a couple minor changes that I made. And then I had the proof, the secured proof copy, the digital copy of the book that I was able to start sending out to previewers, people that I wanted to endorse the book. And we ended up getting a handful of solid endorsements for the book to put on the back of the book, on the website, to go in their catalog. And basically the book was finalized and ready to be printed a couple months before the actual release date, which is July 3rd in the UK and July 28th in North America. So we have a 3-month window where we're going to have a big push for promoting the book. So the sort of 2 months or a month and a half leading up to the book launch, and then a month and a half after the book launches, where I'll do things like guest post on blogs or do talks or guest on podcasts to promote the book. And that will be another episode. I'm sure that I will talk a little bit about how the promoting of the book went, but hopefully that was useful insight for you to sort of understand the publishing process, what it's like to get a book published by a traditional publisher. And because I used Publishizer as the crowdfunding campaign platform to get the book started, I didn't need a book agent. But if you are going to publish a book with a traditional publisher, I do suggest getting an agent, and really any help you can get along the way in publishing or any field you're going into where you have unknowns. Having a mentor or a coach, a guide, is going to be super helpful, because you're going to spend a lot of time figuring things out anyway. And if you have someone helping you, it's going to be way easier. So definitely all the things in place in the book industry, an editor, a publisher, an agent, those people all know what they're doing, and it's really helpful to have them. All you need to do then is spend months and months crafting a really good book, that's step one. Then you have to get the book out to people so that they can read it and learn from it and enjoy it. So it's been a real fun, real interesting learning experience. And I hope you do check out the book, Superconductors. It's out in July. You can pre-order your copy if you're listening to this before then, or get your copy available wherever books are sold. Thanks so much for listening to The Art of Adventure today. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.